I'm hot. It's so stuffy. It's hard to breathe. I'm not well. Is it daytime? Nighttime? Time stands still. You've done everything possible to break me, to crush my will, my fight, to silence me. You won't succeed. My name is Narges Mohammadi. I'm writing from Evin prison in Tehran. The authoritarian religious government has relentlessly suppressed the woman life freedom movement. But even if people are no longer protesting in the streets, the spirit of the movement lives on.
This is the last footage of her as a free woman. After many years in prison, Iranian human rights activist Narges Mohammadi was released on bail in October 2020. Immediately, she risked being jailed again, meeting with former inmates and making a film about the Iranian regime's crimes.
We're a group of 23 activists who have experienced solitary confinement. Together we're going to the judiciary offices to file a complaint, arguing that solitary confinement violates the law. This is a historic moment. This complaint means that both the tortured and the perpetrators are registered with the authorities. This is an important step in our fight for justice. You'd better put the camera down. We're nearly there. Otherwise, they'll take it from you.
No matter what you film in Iran, you always need permission from the regime forces. Even if you have permission, you're strictly monitored. You're not allowed to film near court buildings. That's why we had to film in secret.
Together with filmmakers Vahid Zarazadeh and Gelare Kokavand, Narges Mohammadi began interviewing regime opponents for her documentary White Torture. The name describes an especially brutal form of torture experienced by her interview subjects, and by Mohammadi herself. It was a dangerous undertaking. Almost simultaneously, authorities raided the homes of the entire team in Tehran.
They broke down my apartment door. Each time we filmed, we had to copy the footage onto separate hard drives and send them to different places. Otherwise, they would have confiscated the material when they searched our homes. They didn't find anything because on the day they arrested Narges, we'd hidden all the film footage.
I was with Narges when the regime forces broke into her house. And because I witnessed her bravery that day, I followed her example when they came to my place a few days later. When they told me to put on a headscarf, I said, "You've come into my house. I don't have to wear a headscarf here. I make the rules here."
The other two filmmakers managed to get the highly sensitive footage out of the country. They now live in exile in Germany. But Narges Mohammadi was sent back to prison a few months later. She's still there today.
I gave up everything as a woman, a mother, and a human being to fight for freedom, equality, and democracy. I don't regret that. But that doesn't apply to my children, Ali and Kiana. I regret that I can't be with them.
Eight years ago, Narges Mohammadi's children left for Paris to join their father in exile. Twins Ali and Kiana haven't seen their mother since then. The Iranian regime forbids any contact. Their last phone call was a year ago.
I don't hold much hope of seeing her again, but even if I don't, I will always be proud of her.
We grew up like this, with this fight against the government. No matter where we are, even if we were on Mars, we'll always be concerned with what's happening in Iran, in our country.
Growing up in Iran, their mother, Narges Mohammadi, was already campaigning for women's rights. Their father, Tari Rahmani, also fought for human rights. The children have many fond memories of their extended family. But they also remember one or the other parent often being in prison, and regime forces storming their home.
I remember men breaking down the door. My father was hiding when they came in. Even though I was so little, I still shudder thinking about it. I remember the terrible feeling of seeing my father being taken away. I thought, no, let go of Dad, he doesn't want to go.
Tari Rahmani was imprisoned in Iran for 14 years. In 1988, when Ayatollah Khomeini had thousands of political prisoners executed, he survived. When he faced imprisonment again, he fled to Paris. He hasn't seen his wife for 11 years and hasn't been able to visit his homeland.
My body is in Paris, but my soul is in Tehran. Sometimes when I'm on the streets of Paris, I imagine they're the great boulevards of Tehran, Revolution Street and Republic Street.
Narges Mohammadi did not follow him into exile, despite the fact that Iranian authorities would have been more than happy to let her leave. From abroad, her voice would have been less powerful.
I wanted us to go together. But when I went abroad, I realized that I wanted to go back. Living abroad is like living in an aquarium. You're not in the place where you're needed. Everything is happening in Iran. In this fight, it's important to have principles. The way I know Narges, she won't leave Iran. And because she won't leave, we have to organize our lives accordingly.
The regime wants me to disappear. But I won't be defeated by this long separation, even if at times I'm overcome by an overwhelming sadness that makes me think I won't survive.
Even after her public accusations against the government, interviews exposing the regime's crimes, and continual prison sentences, Narges Mohammadi has kept working, including by filming her documentary White Torture. In it, she describes her own experiences in solitary confinement, alone in a cell, for weeks and months at a time.
In that moment, your heart stops. And yes, when the door is slammed shut, you're terrified. 4 times in solitary. My cell just 3 paces wide. artificial light, 24 hours a day. No book, nothing. The spreading silence was like an endless scream, paralyzing my brain cells.
You're stripped of all your senses in solitary. Your sense of smell is gone. The only sense that might work a bit is hearing. They take away your senses. You lose your ability to perceive things. You're in a void. Your organs are working, you're alive in an endless grave. But you're not dead. You're still there. That nothingness is really like experiencing death.
Journalist Sasan Arai has served numerous prison sentences in Iran, including a total of 288 days in solitary confinement. In 2009, as Iranians protested against the official results of the presidential election, he was one of the journalists making sure the news reached the wider world.
It's kind of ridiculous when I say that their crime was journalism. But journalism is hugely significant. Many Iranian journalists have been in prison.
It depends on the length of the detention. After a few days, it's pure torture. Political prisoners especially are subjected to that treatment. They put pressure on them by keeping them in solitary for a few months. Often the government of the Islamic Republic and similar authoritarian regimes claim that political prisoners are foreign spies and things like that. The regime makes up a story along those lines and chooses the people who will play along.
People are often arrested without being told the charges they'll face or how long they'll be detained. Then come degrading interrogations, which also fall under the term white torture.
I endured a year and a half in solitary, once 6 months, then 4 months, 3 months, and 6 weeks. You can't imagine how hard it is. When you go into the cell, you feel like the walls are closing in on you, and your heart is constricted. It's like your heart is being ripped out. That's what white torture feels like. We use the term white torture because it leaves no visible wounds on the body, only psychological ones.
British Iranian student Narges Mohammadi was imprisoned in 2014. Her offense? She had tried to attend a men's volleyball game in Tehran, something banned for Iranian women.
One of their strategies is to humiliate you. You're not even allowed to use the toilet when you want to. And an important part of this humiliation is that they open and close the door whenever they please. You have no privacy at all.
Then come the humiliations of a patriarchal society. Who are you anyway? You're not a person, you're a woman. They exert pressure by telling women that they are inferior. One weapon of white torture in prisons is to force women to make sexual confessions. Many women have told Narges they've experienced this. It's systematic. The interrogator isn't doing it for his own sexual gratification. It's part of the procedure. A male interrogator will say to a female prisoner, "Describe your sexual relationship with that man."
Narges Mohammadi used her brief time out of prison to document these stories. And later in prison, she took the risk of continuing this work. During the Woman Life Freedom protests, she succeeded in publicizing accounts of sexual violence against prisoners. Prolonged separation from family and children is also used as a method of torture. Narges Mohammadi is haunted by a dream she had in her cell of her young daughter.
I actually felt Kiana's lips on my cheek, her small, warm lips. Kiana kissed me, and I wanted to hug her when I suddenly realized I'm in a cell. I didn't dare open my eyes to be sure. In moments like that, we're simply human beings.
Many years have passed since then. Kiana is now 17. She thinks about the milestones, big and small, that she hasn't been able to share with her mother.
As I got older, I started to miss my mum more and more. I was a bit fed up with her not being with us. I wanted my mother. I wish she had taught me how to put on makeup, how to dress. She's a woman. We have the same body. She could teach me so much about myself, but I had to figure it out all on my own. I wish my mum had been there to help me. Of course I miss her, but there are people who are worse off than me. I consider myself lucky that my mum is still alive.
I do sport on the side just to keep going, to take my mind off things so that life can go on. It's an attempt to escape the situation, even if at the end of the day, it doesn't work. My mum and dad are my role models. I've seen everything they've sacrificed, how they dealt with things. They've sacrificed sleep and important moments. I remember mum coming out of prison very ill. That was hard for me, but it was also an inspiration.
My mum is a fighter, and I'm really proud of her. I wish that one day she'd sit next to me and I could draw her. That would be so cool. This is just a person I saw walking by, but I wanted to draw her. She was incredibly poised and free at the same time. This young woman is fabulous, and I think freedom has something to do with it. Because it's wonderful to feel free. I think freedom is everything. If the young women in Iran could be as free as she is, that would be great.
Narges Mohammadi was able to smuggle a letter to us out of prison through secret channels. She wrote about what moved her most during the interviews she conducted with inmates who'd been tortured.
What shocked me was how severe the consequences of solitary confinement are. Even decades later, it has huge effects on the soul, the mind, and even the body.
One of the worst things was that they could open the door whenever they wanted. After I was free, I always locked the door of my room. Before, I didn't mind someone coming into my room. But afterwards, I'd suddenly be in shock whenever I sensed a movement. I was on edge that someone could come in, and I would have no control over it.
In the solitary cell, they told me, "We'll go out and come back with your family." When I got into the interrogation room, I heard voices of a woman and a child. I felt a burning pain. My heart had stopped beating. It turned out that I'd had a stroke. I can hardly see now. I can only read with my right eye. I can't drive or write. I can't even see my food properly.
If you take a human being and put them in a meat grinder, what comes out will still have some human material. But solitary confinement? When you come out, there's nothing left of you. Even if you have the energy to defend yourself. Solitary confinement is really an attempt to destroy a person.
White torture is a method that eventually breaks its victims. The regime coerces false confessions in order to publicly present detainees as guilty. Activist Abdullah Momeni has experienced how that works firsthand.
The present indictment was drawn up on the basis of solid evidence, as well as clear and unequivocal confessions by the defendants.
When I read the confession, I felt immense hatred for myself. I asked myself how I could be so weak, and I wondered how I could make up for it. I feel like the foulest person in the world. That can drive you to suicide.
Today, I'm thinking about those who made forced confessions in solitary confinement and were executed. Their stories are buried with them.
In December 2023, Narges Mohammadi is not in solitary confinement. She's in Evin prison, in the women's wing for long-term political prisoners. Taking photos is forbidden. These are images from a hacked surveillance camera in another wing.
The pictures are a lot like how it is. Beds against the wall, bunk beds. Those who've been inside say that it's very similar to what it looks like in the women's wing.
Mariam Klaren has been a political activist since her mother, the German-Iranian Nahid Tahabi, was jailed in Iran 3 years ago. Tahabi too campaigned for women's rights and was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Narges and my mom have the same room, and their beds are right beside each other.
Some detainees are permitted occasional phone calls. Narges Mohammadi has been able to smuggle out statements critical of the regime.
It can be during one visit or spread over several phone calls. It can be via another prisoner who answers questions for Narges. It's really not easy, and it's very dangerous, which is why not every prisoner does it.
Narges Mohammadi is severely ill with a heart condition. She's now dependent on medical care. In November 2023, when the prison administration tried to force her to wear a headscarf for her journey to the hospital, she went on a hunger strike. No food, no medication, her life was in danger. Days later, Narges Mohammadi was allowed to go to the hospital without a headscarf, and her friends created this photo montage. A small victory against the regime.
Refusing to wear a headscarf to go to the hospital might seem trivial to many people. But the Islamic Republic envelops us like the shell of a big egg. People are knocking against the shell from the inside, hoping that cracks will appear, and one day it will break.
Narges Mohammadi is 51 years old. She spent a total of almost 9 years in prison and still has 8 more to go. Despite this, her will to fight has become even stronger.
She's decided to fight against the use of solitary confinement. Today, Narges is much braver and more determined in what she does than before.
What impresses me most is her humanity, that she puts others before herself.
She's stubborn, and sometimes that's not good. But in situations like these, it's a strength because she never gives up. Victory is not easy. It won't come today or tomorrow, but it is certain. That's what she said, and that's what I believe.
Unbreakable. Against a powerful regime that suppresses its opponents and has silenced so many. But even if major protests have stopped, many continue to resist by challenging the rules of the Islamic Republic.
I don't think there won't be any more protests in Iran. In my religious family, my sister responded to what happened by taking off her headscarf. The movement is like embers among the ashes. The fire can reignite at any time.
Narges Mohammadi was awarded the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize. It's both an honor and an inspiration for all those who have taken to the streets and risked their lives under the banner of Jin, Jian, Azadi. Woman, life, freedom. This is Narges Mohammadi's message from Evin prison.
I call on all of you to help free people from authoritarian systems, especially religious and misogynistic ones. Stand up for peace.